So welcome everybody. We're going to do a little overview of special education. And I'm here with my fabulous coordinator, Lauren Jeffries. Say hi, Lauren.
Hi.
Okay. So keeping with the theme of We Are the Field of Dreams, the first inning. So these are just the sections. Well, I'll just go over a little basic special ed history, some little legal pieces. Then we're going to talk a little bit about the IEP process, so you have a good understanding of why and how things are supposed to flow. So as you're in any meeting, can't see my screen. Oops. Thank you. It's because I didn't click the right button. Thank you very much. It's having too much fun seeing you guys. All right. So now you can see it. So here's the agenda. So our tape will have all of us at the beginning. It's a little special ed history, a little basic legal, nothing too in-depth, but a few things for you. We're going to go over IEP process, a little bit of compliance, and then we're going to talk about services. Oops, this is wrong. We're not talking about grouping scholars, sorry, that was for our ESs. And a little bit of communication. If we have time, we'll have some questions and maybe some fun. So our vision and mission, of course, we all know, and when it comes to special education, we follow the same vision when we're working with our special needs scholars. And of course, today and every day, we want to keep with those Arctic values. So as we go along today in our norms, keep yourself muted so we don't hear background noise. Raise your hand if you have a question. We'll try to take breaks in between for questions so we keep things going. And hopefully today we're going to hit this out of the park and have some fun. So I'm going to start with a little bit of history. Special education didn't officially begin as a law, federal law, until 1975. Many of you weren't even born yet. I was, but even I was young. So it didn't come out of anything sweet and nice. We had people doing special education services. Like there were always people who were working with our blind and our deaf children. There are always special teachers, private, that were working with kids. But when it came to the public schools, they often excluded any child with special needs from entering even the public schools. Now, a famous movie kind of illustrates this for us in a rather adult, humorous way. Have any of you ever seen Forrest Gump? Nods of yes. There's a scene in Forrest Gump where his mom is trying to get him into the public school. And the principal shows her a chart and says he's below the chart line. So the following scenes are rather adult. We don't need to go into them. But if you haven't seen the movie, it's quite humorous. You may want to. But unfortunately, as much of that as Hollywood, I'm not sure if that exact scene took place, but kids were excluded. So special education, the federal law, was born out of federal cases where children were excluded from school. So it started out as PL 94-142. It was reauthorized for a few years. 1987, I was teaching. They actually added in where parents could get lawyers and bring them to IEP meetings and go through due process. That was fun for us. But again, it's a civil rights law. 1990 to 97, they reauthorized PL 94-142, and we called it IDEA, Individuals Disabilities Education Act. Starting out, it said, students were required to have access to general ed, and the school had to provide additional services like OT, speech, and nursing. So not until 1990. So then these related services came into place. It was reauthorized in 97, not too many changes, discipline stuff happened. I think that's when they put in, actually, I know that's when they put in the requirement for behavior support plans in at the federal level. California had them for years. I remember that because I was pregnant with my daughter that year. Anyhow, and 2004 is the last time that they have reauthorized IDEA, and they call it Individuals Disabilities Improvement Act. No one ever puts the I in. But as you can see, let's see, that is 20 years ago, almost 19 years ago. Federal laws are usually reauthorized every 5 to 7 years. So we've been operating off of the same stuff for a while. But the biggest change in 2004 was with NCLB. Special education combined, that students not only have the right to access general ed curriculum, the law supports the integration with non-disabled peers. So that was the biggest change in 2004 that we've been operating on ever since, which is why we say we try to be inclusive. It's why we're talking about more collaboration even here at Compass, which is more difficult since we do things separately. We can't just walk down the hall and walk our students into each other's rooms. So with that said, we're going to talk about some of the things that will be changing this year for us. So the biggest thing to remember is we have the responsibility to ensure that every individual has the opportunity to receive a high quality education from pre-K, elementary, second, special ed, technical, higher ed, and beyond. I love this quote. That's our responsibility. Here is our responsibility not only to provide that, but help the LCs do it as well. I kind of look at it as we've got 2 students from every classroom, right? So what is an IEP? This is something I want to let you guys know, and I want you to keep this in your minds at all time. The intent of the legislature was that individualized education program team meetings be non-adversarial and convened solely for the purpose of making educational decisions for the good of the individual with exceptional needs. Who's the focus of an IEP meeting? Anybody or everybody. This is a point where you can unmute and shout out.
The scholar.
Yay! I know, it's Friday morning. We all need a cup of coffee. Yes, it's the scholar. It's not the LC. It's not the parent. Actually, it's the parent at the meeting. They are not the focus. It's not our job to make them happy. It's our job to ensure we are making educational decisions for the good of that scholar. What do they need? What do they require? So that they can then access and benefit. We're going to talk about what that means in a minute here too. So some legal things. So special education, it's a unique bird. I've been at this for 38 years. I know. I must have started when I was 5. Okay, I got a couple of you smiling. I wish I could see the rest of the faces because I like to interact. So if you're up to it and feeling it, let me see your faces here today. But we're run by two things, not only the federal government, right? We also have our state ed code, which has to take the federal law and then the state puts it into our own regs and laws. And California, being California historically, does things their own way. So they don't always match exactly. We do a few extra things here because we're California, right? We're extra. But then we also have the fun of dealing with case law, meaning something that's gone through the courts, gone to the Ninth Circuit or above. Yes, if we get sued, well, it's not really getting sued. If we have some parent file for due process, it is potentially, it could go all the way to the Supreme Court. That doesn't happen very often, but I, in my tenure, have actually been to the Ninth Circuit with a case. So that can happen. District court happens more often. So you can appeal all the way up because it's a federal law about civil rights. So we also then have case law we have to be aware of as we're dealing with special education. Now, you don't have to worry about this. There's just some key ones you need to know about. Most of the other ones, if they're significant, we'll share the information, changes a form or two here and there, or a procedure. Luckily, nothing earth-shaking has happened since 2019. So, some big ones for us to remember. Remember to always put things in writing, especially placement. Because this neat little case called Union v. Smith from the Ninth Circuit. Ninth Circuit is California. There's like 9 circuits, right? California is 9. They didn't put it in writing. It was 1994. And it went to the Ninth Circuit and basically said, if it's not in writing, it didn't happen. Words to remember. Don't fail to offer services because the parent indicated they will get private services. There's lots of little cases that go with this, but the main thing is we as an LEA, local education agency, have to be sure that we are providing the services the scholar requires. Now, when it comes to private services like nursing services, usually it's ABA, which is behavioral services. Parent can get through their insurances and things. They can make that choice. We have to say, we're offering and have it available if they need it. The other thing is a parent can say, I don't like what you're doing. I'm going to disenroll and send my kid to a private school. And then I'm going to make you pay for it. Believe it or not, they can file for due process, and then we have to support our offer of faith and try to support that what we've offered is appropriate. So we have to be careful of those things. Last, when it comes about services and placement, it's okay to talk about multiple placements. Matter of fact, and services. We want to talk about the continuum, correct? But in the end, we can only recommend one. And remember, the IEP is Compass offering to the parent. We want their input. We want them involved, right? We're working together. But in the end, we can only make one offer of placement and services. We can't do if this, then that, maybe this. We also can't make an offer of placement for someplace else. Oh, we're going to disenroll from Compass and go to our public school. Can you write the IEP so they can implement it? No. Can't do that. Because we aren't them. They have to give the offer of FAPE to the parent. We give our offer of FAPE. So takeaways: no good deed ever goes unpunished, especially in special education. Don't give away favors. Don't make sure we give one offer and we're sure of what that offer is as we move forward. And remember, we're the professionals. We know what we're doing. That's why we have to recommend something to the parent as our offer of FAPE. All right, last little piece on legal, and then I'll let you guys shoot me a couple questions. Two big cases that define FAPE. There's the Amy Rowley case and Enru, and I always forget his first name. Actually, I think his first name was Enru. So back in, I forget what year, but the Amy Rowley case went all the way to Supreme Court and basically gave us the definition of what FAPE is and ed benefit. And back then, Amy was a scholar with hearing loss. And parents wanted more and more services so she could get all A's and progress even faster because she was doing well in school in some areas, but needed the support due to her hard of hearing. And in the end, they basically said, we have to provide that base floor of opportunity. We don't have to give the best or parent preferred services. We need to ensure that the child is getting ed benefit and moving grade to grade. Lo and behold, in 2019, I think that, yeah, 2019 is when it came out with the answer. The Enru case, which came out of Colorado to the Supreme Court, a young man with significant cognitive disabilities, I believe autism. And the parents said, well, you're not providing my child with FAPE. They aren't getting ed benefit. And out of that one came that, wait a minute, it can't be de minimis. It can't be minimal ed benefit. It has to be meaningful. California, as I said, we're special, always use the meaningful ed benefit standard anyway. So it's not a big change for us, but this made it federal. And so we must provide a meaningful educational benefit. It cannot be de minimis, in other words, minimal. And it has to match the scholars, the students' learning abilities. So it's going to look different for each and every scholar. This is significant because there's been states, not so much California, because we're rather litigious and our parents would never allow this, that were basically, if you had cognitive disability, yeah, you know, as long as you were learning something, they were okay with it. It's not okay. Regardless, we have to ensure that we are providing a meaningful program and meaningful educational benefit. It's because of this that we're making some changes in our special ed department with some curriculum this year. Teach Town. Okay. Questions? Anybody got a legal question for me? Now that I'm not a lawyer, but I mean a basic legal, like special ed. Oh, come on. I know you guys do because you ask me all the time. And if you've got the question, I guarantee somebody else in this room, Zoom room, has the same question. Anything in the chat?
Janae raised her hand.
Huh?
Janae has a question.
Janae.
So I just have a couple questions. One, I appreciate what you said. It's not a question, it's just a comment. I appreciate what you said about like no good deed type of thing. I think that it's very important to know that like we want to continue to like stick with, you know, data, rely on the experts and those things and follow the protocol. I think that is when you start to kind of you know, promise or like just do things kind of like, oh yeah, that'll be okay. That's really where we find ourselves getting into trouble. And that's where we find like legal litigation and things like that. So it's like, not saying you have to walk on eggshells, but I think it's really good. I think that was a good reminder, Amy. Like we just need to make sure that we're sticking with, we always need to rely on the data and the experts to comment on those things. And that we're following like the special ed protocol. So I appreciated that. My question though is, okay, so when we are looking at like what we're offering, like for FAPE or things like that, where, and I don't know if you're going to dive into this, is there a specific person that we would kind of have take the lead on that? And then like as LEA, we could then facilitate like that discussion if needed, or what does that kind of look like? Because that's where I kind of run into, it's like when we say this is our offer, is that who's kind of taking the lead on that when we're, as that LEA?
We're going to go into roles a little bit here later, but I'm going to give you a quick answer. So generally, let's talk about the reality of an IEP meeting. Your ed specialist is the case manager. They're putting together the IEP. They've sat down and kind of, we're allowed to walk into a meeting with something in our mind about what could be FAPE. Okay. We can't come in with the blanks. We're not supposed to come in with a blank slate, but we're not allowed to make a decision before the meeting. So generally the lead for most IEP meetings that are simple and non-adversarial, and actually they're usually a lot of fun and nice because you're talking with the parent, the ed specialist or case manager is the one that's going to take the lead. Now, we get into those little bit more complicated meetings that are getting a little adversarial or a little complicated. Again, when we get into those meetings, hopefully we'll do a pre-meeting and we can talk about whose role it will be to do what and make that offer or present information to get us to that consensus, because there's a lot of different ways we can do it. But generally, it's going to be the role of the ed specialist or case manager to do that. There'll be times where I've had to sit in a meeting because it was contentious. I took that role. Lauren could take that role. One of you may, if it goes off, if it goes off kilter in the meeting, as the admin designee, by law, you're the one that needs to make that offer. So when things go haywire and people are back and forth, that's one of the roles of the admin designee, is to bring it back around and say, okay, this is Compass's offer of FAPE. Here it is. We need you to consider it, and kind of end that meeting. But that's one of the roles of being admin. When you're an admin designee, when you're in a leadership position to facilitate, is to bring those things back around. But the law is very clear. When there is disagreement, then the shall we say, the person that makes the final decision in an IEP meeting is the LEA rep, the admin designee at that point. That's why when we talk about roles, it's so important to be mindful and paying attention throughout the meeting in case it gets to that point, and be involved so that you can basically be the one that states, this is what Compass is offering. And that's where it comes down to the legal. Now, our hope is that those things happen not very often, and we want to pre-meet before those, and we're going to go over some of those little details so you all feel supported and don't feel like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? And then when you feel, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? How you handle it. Because even I've been in the, oh my gosh, what am I going to do meetings. And every once in a while, we need to phone a friend. And so we know all those things are there. Does that help, Janae?
There's
Yep,
an
that was perfect.
additional question from Janae there. Can we have that offer of FAPE as a proposed offer prior to the IEP meeting, sorry, so that the whole team is aware of this going into it?
The team can pre-meet or have a staffing meeting, and they can talk about the options that may fit the scholar. Within that discussion, no decisions can be made, but the team could potentially say going into the meeting, I think this is where we're headed. And this might be, we're thinking as a team that might be the best, what we want to provide. So yes and no, I would never say we're going to send it, here's what we're going to propose, because that's predetermination. But what the team can say is, here's the options we can consider. And, we're thinking this may be the best offer or where we're headed. Does anybody else have any discussion on it as we head into the meeting? And remember, we always have to take into consideration the parent and the other team members that come in who aren't, with us today. California is a big one when it comes to predetermination. Every time anybody files for due process, two things come up. Your predetermined placement, if there issues placement, and you didn't allow me as the parent to participate, even though maybe you did 8 meetings. Because they know that those two are hard. Those are objective. I mean, they're very subjective issues to support. So, recap. The team can always discuss options. They can discuss potential options. The team can come to sort of a weak consensus so they're on the same page. But no decision can ever be made outside of an IEP meeting on what is being proposed or offered. And that's semantics. And the one warning I want to give you guys, because we are online and everything is in writing and email, don't have those conversations in email ever. That's a Google or a Zoom verbal. Anybody know why? Why would I say that? Dawn, close.
So it can't be used as evidence.
Right, it's not evidence.
Yeah, it's
Right.
written down, you have a document, it's documented that you had that conversation, right?
Why? That we made a decision, right?
Yeah.
They can ask for everything that has that child's name on it, including all of your emails. So be very, very careful what you put in writing.
Okay, so I'm looking at the time. All right, we're gonna do a quick breakout. You guys can talk about this. Here's your little scenario. I come back
Kelsey
and
has
we're
a
gonna ask.
question. I don't know if we want to answer that real quick.
Go ahead.
Hi, so I put it in the chat. Did I hear you correctly state that as the admin LEA, if the meeting goes south, we are the one required to make that offer of faith?
Yes.
So as this options coordinator and gen ed all day, every day, like I totally rely on that ed specialist, case manager, and the specialist to make that determination. Because I've been in IEPs when the specialist is like saying they need vision therapy. And I'm thinking, I'm not a doctor. Okay. But then I've also heard, oh no, we don't do vision therapy. So what do I offer in that situation? Like I feel totally blind. And after my previous litigation situations, I feel like you need a gag order on her. Like, don't say anything. I don't want anything held against me.
So the law is very clear. It's California Ed Code. That is one of the roles of the admin designee. By the time you get to the offer of faith, okay, so the parent brings in a vision therapist who does this whole fun, and I could give you his name, assessment. And you're like, oh, those are big words. I have no idea what they mean. And he gets to and he says, they need 3 sessions a week or blah, 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 blah. Well, we're still reviewing his report. At that point, the case manager, or if they don't, say, We haven't gotten to the offer of FAPE yet. Thank you for your recommendation. When, by the time you get to the end of the meeting, the team should have discussed the needs. If you're mindful and listening, we get to the end and the case, let's say this is what happens, right? The doctor and the parent are like, oh no, they have to have it. They have to have it. The whole discussion has been, we don't see that issue. We don't see that need. You didn't present any goals. And let's say this happens sometimes because like you guys are case managers, they're teachers, right? You have more authority than they do. They're stuck because they're intimidated potentially. So at that point, you need to listen to everything that was said and say what it is that you heard being recommended by the Compass team. Now, let's say everybody was tight-lipped and there's still disagreement. At that point, if you're really unsure and there's a big disagreement, you can always say, well, there seems to be a disagreement. We've considered your request for vision therapy. We've considered this outside assessment. At this time, we are denying the service, and we'll get back to you with a prior written notice and our next steps.
So we have to say we're denying that service? Like, partly?
If somebody else,
I
if
didn't
the
know that.
case manager is if the case manager at that point in time isn't saying it, then somebody else at Compass has to. And so it would fall on you.
Do we have a list of like, if this, like this diagnosis, then this is allowable? Because like,
Oh,
if they come in
no.
and they're saying he's blind in one eye and deaf in one ear, and we say vision therapy is the fix, and they may even have goals, and I'm sitting there,
Carly, you just
thinking, okay, sounds
okay.
good.
So again,
I don't know.
so let's say you're saying, I think it sounds good. Then, as designee, you need to ask some questions. So that's what we talk about, facilitating a meeting. When you are in a leadership position in any meeting, when there's a disagreement and the team is stuck, someone has to take charge. Your leadership. So you have to take charge and either say, we're not going to make a decision today. I heard the team saying X, Y, and Z. Is that correct? This is where we're going. This is our offer. So that's why it's so important to be mindful and paying attention throughout the meeting, listening to the facts and the data, because it is your Compass. The ed specialist is Compass. The case manager is Compass. It is Compass who's making that offer of FAPE. It's not you personally. It is Compass. So we have to have that information. And no, I can never, ever, and will never, ever give out anything that says if this, then that, because that's predetermination. And boy, would we get in trouble because somebody would find that.
So maybe we can.
And we do vision therapy if it's absolutely required for the scholar after having a full assessment and looking at it. And those are the scholars where we need to do staffing meetings when we have those weird things like vision therapy or central auditory processing or some other things that we don't like as day-to-day teachers, we don't deal with all the time. Like, I don't know what that's for and how it works. So if we do the pre-work, you can avoid some of those problems.
So will there be a process for that? Because I've been in a handful of IPs. I guess I'm a little traumatized from those vision therapy requests. Hopefully none squeaked by me. Maybe they.
Well, let's keep going. I'm gonna skip our breakout Get anybody mind? If anybody minds, please raise your hand.
Janae's
I
hand
didn't
up.
think so.
Janae wants to go in the breakout room. No, Janae.
Well, no, I was just gonna share something because I've been on a vision therapy IEP and I guess like, so a couple of things, just so clarify for my mind, and this might help Carly, I don't know if it will, but when the service provider, and I guess maybe clarification. So when like service providers have done the assessments or it's an annual, they have to have the report that shows like, yeah, this service has made progress. This is the progress the scholar has made. And this is my recommendation based on like this, the diagnosis and the progress. So for example, I was on a vision therapy IEP a couple of years ago. The person presenting had actually showed all of the progress that the scholar had made, like through their data and graphs. And they're like, we're just proposing like, you know, 6 more months and here's the goal. He's almost there. We just need 6 more months. And I was like, okay, well, sounds fine to me. Right. Like it's not, if the data is there, right. I would think that if the team decides, then we're good. But don't the service providers like, don't they give you guys that information before the IEP so you can say like, oh my gosh, this vision therapist person is requesting 100 hours of vision therapy a week or whatever, and then we would be like, whoa, we need to have a pre-meeting before this. Okay.
Generally, we have some. Dr. S, who will periodically not provide us the reports and information. But if we ever have a Dr. S meeting, one of us will be at that because I know who he is and how he behaves.
But I wonder if we know that that service, say we don't get the report until like 9 a.m.
We are going to we'll call a pre-meet.
Yeah, but I think you have to have like, don't they have to provide it within 24 hours? Like, or what's the law with that? Because then don't they have to share? What's the parents' right? They have to get all the reports. It just says in a timely manner, right? Or
right.
Does it say, okay.
Yeah.
Because I think
they have
like
to, in a timely manner after they're written. So yeah, so there's not much we can do to force an outside provider, especially a private provider that maybe a parent has, or one that somehow is not cooperating. This year, we've tried very hard to alleviate those, so we'll have less. But the main thing is if any of our team members, and we do have a process, Carly, and we shared it out last year, and we're going to share it out again today on how to request and what you need to have to be able to do a kind of a staffing pre-meeting. You, as a coordinator, can request it. Our ed specialists, our case managers can request one. Lauren, Leslie, myself, and our new program specialist will be coming on here very soon. First name, Roya. I think I can let that slip. She's supposed to start next week, Wednesday. I'm so excited. We'll also be part of that. So we'll have some additional staff to really help and support you guys. So bottom line is what I want to take away from this is if you're the LAA, the designee at a meeting, you're taking the notes. Most of the meetings are simple, right? But every once in a while, you're going to have to step into those leadership shoes and take that leadership role, and you're going to have to make a decision. And I will back you up on the decision you make.
I have
as
a
long
question.
as that decision is focused on the scholar and the scholar's needs. I want you all to know that I will do that as long as it's scholar focused, because there is no black and white in special ed. We live in the gray. Janae, sorry.
Okay, sorry. I don't want to. I know you have we want to move forward, but one last thing. So you were saying like the process to schedule a pre-meeting would like how would I know that I would want to have a pre-meeting ahead of time?
That's what I just said in the chat too. I've never seen a pre-IEP report to even know I need to call a pre-IEP meeting. I just show up with my notes in hand and then they go, hey, we want vision therapy.
Okay, so some of the things I've been talking about in some of the meetings last year and talking with people is we need to know what's happening. So if we know there is some contentious stuff happening, so the ST lets you know as the coordinator, hey, mom's not real happy. Okay, may want to pre-meet. If we know on the special ed side, our case manager knows we've got some unique assessments where we're reviewing, they may call the pre-meet. You're not going to want it for every meeting. We're going to go over kind of that decision making. Bottom line, all it takes is an email. Janae, you'd email me. Amy, I heard this. What can we do? I'll facilitate it. You guys, I mean, if you know, and because you know some of the parents, the STs talk to you all the time. Mom's upset. Mom wants more speech. Mom doesn't like the speech therapist we have. Mom wants a new case manager. I would reach out to your coordinator and say, hey, before this meeting, here's some things that are coming up. So you guys can plan ahead of time based on what we know. Can't do anything about things we don't know, right?
Well, I would say too, like if a parent is complaining, like I would tell my ST and I've tried to guide them to this space too, or my coordinators to guide them to guide their STs. Like if they're like, oh, this parent is really upset about SAI or whatever, I'm like, you need to reach out to your special education case manager. Right. So then I would hope that the case manager would know that they know to schedule that pre-meeting, right? Because I do think, I do, if we hear it and things like that, I guess we just are wanting to make sure we don't go in blind and we don't get blindsided. And there's been a lot of cases where we have, and I think that's why we're a little like hesitant to just be like, yeah, we're the LEA, like we're on it. But it's like,
right.
We've come in
It's scary.
so many times blindsided, and
yes,
is it okay if we're like, if we don't know like we don't know what to say, if we just say, you know what, let me look into it, I think we're going to need a hold of part 2. Like I just feel like there's a lot of, I don't want to have a million part 2s, but there are some cases where we're like put on the spot, we're caught off guard, deer in the headlights, and we're like, what? And
okay, let me tell you, I've been caught. Now I've been doing this a long time. I know kind of the wording to move around it, but there's been times where I've even said, we're gonna have to do part 2. I need more information before this team can truly consider what you're asking us for. Lauren, you ever been there? Okay. And it's the reality. And so that's where you have my permission to take a leadership role and make that determination that you need to suspend the meeting and move on. It's okay. If you can't say yes, then we're going to talk about how you work with all that, and we'll continue working on all that all year. And it is a reality, and I know it's kind of scary. They don't happen often. When they do, they're tough, and that's why we're putting these more communication. Our goal this year is to collaborate and consult with each other so that we know what's going on ahead of time as much as we can, so we're all working towards what's best for the scholar. So reach out. It's all good. So now we're going to head into the second inning. Okay. And then we'll take a stretch break. We spent an awful lot of time here. Lauren, take over and I'll click.
All righty, second inning. We have the rule book. What is special education? In the United States, the governing federal law is IDEA. That's the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. Under this act, special education is specially designed instruction at no cost to parents to meet the unique needs of a child with a disability. What does that mean to you? Anyone
All right.
wanna...
So what does that mean to you guys? Put in the chat. What does that mean to you?
Can you go back a slide? I was reading Dawn's comment in the chat. Sorry.
Thank you for your honesty. And that happens. And I was actually contemplating that. Specially designed instruction at no cost to parents to meet the unique needs of a child with a disability. What does that mean to you? What is special ed to you then?
Michelle Bateman says equity.
Could result in equity.
Every IEP will be unique from Heather Hardy. That's true. Yes, individual. Aaron Smith says individualized support per the IEP. Yes, individualized. That's the key. Individualized. Shouldn't look the same. No two should look the same. Individual supports from Melissa Mayer. Oh, no, they're moving quicker.
Right.
Melissa says individualized supports to provide equitable access to education. Yes. Jen Tatum, meeting every kiddo where they are to support how they learn, how they need it. Jacob screams equitable access to education. Yes. Oh, right
Did
on.
we charge anybody money?
And that leads into the next one. Yeah, Casey, at no cost, free tape.
So who has to pay for it? The school budget. Are the scholars ed funds their money, or is that Compass money? Compass. All right, let's move on.
Okay, so there's that free FAPE. You hear a lot about, we need to make an offer of FAPE. So what is FAPE? It is free, appropriate, public education. Free, no cost to parent. Appropriate, it meets the needs of the scholars. Public, so not private. Education and services that provide scholar with educational benefit. The LEA is responsible to make one offer of FAPE that is reasonably calculated to provide educational benefit in the least restrictive environment. That's pretty important one. You don't want restrictive. Educated with peers to the greatest extent possible, but that's another one. The IEP can only have one offer of FAPE. So you need to consider everything and make one offer.
I know we're kind of redundant on that, but that's a biggie.
It's a biggie. There's 13 categories that a scholar can be eligible for special education. Autism, blindness, deafness, emotional disturbance, hearing impairment, intellectual disability, multiple disabilities, orthopedic impairment, other health impairment, specific learning disabilities, speech or language impairment, traumatic brain injury, or a visual impairment. You can qualify with one of these, but just because you have one does not necessarily mean you qualify. And I think we're going to talk more about that. Here's Compass's numbers. If you look, intellectual disability, speech or language impairment, hard of hearing, emotional disturbance, orthopedic impairment, other health impaired, specific learning disability, multiple disabilities, and autism. You can look at the breakdown of each for each one of our schools. Take a second to
You can
check
see
that out.
we have a real high number of scholars with autism. And it seems to be growing. Usually SLD and SLI, so learning disabilities, speech and language are your two highest, with OHI next. But we're a little unique with having autism, these numbers for autism. But it makes sense. We're a place where parents feel safe, kids feel safe. So I'm going to be watching this to see if we need to do additional training and support on how to work with students with autism and some of their social needs and how we can address those going forward. Comments, anybody? Has anybody else seen this?
Okay, I'm not going to read this all. IEPN 504 And I know Dawn has presentation of her own as well, but an IEP versus 504, if you need services, basically if services are required. So some parents want accommodations. My child has attention deficit disorder and needs, you know, whatever it may be, needs more time, things like that. They kind of want it documented, this disability. That can be done with a 504. If a child requires services and accommodations and these additional unique supports, which we can get more into at another time, but that would be an IEP. But if you just need some accommodations due to your disability, a 504 might be the appropriate one, but that can be discussed in the SST meetings. Visual concentric circles here. Gen Ed as a whole, we have a 504 within that, and then that little gray thing should be the IEP. Oh wait, sorry.
The point with this is every scholar is a gen ed scholar first. Compass does a great job with that.
First.
Some kids are 504. I could have put another circle here for EL, but it doesn't always fit. It's more of a Venn. And then, yeah, it would be like a Venn that would go or in here like a pie.
I like what we did at the retreat, and we did our
Yeah.
little diagram.
But then the smallest number of scholars are on an IEP with a disability.
Child find. So child find, the district of service is required to do child find, where you basically search for and serve children with disabilities that have not been identified yet. That means we do assessments when referred from SST. Periodically, a parent will request assessment for special education or a 504. Then we work with the parent within 15 days to determine a response. So within 15 days, we'll respond to the request, which may or may not lead to an assessment plan being provided. Eligibility has two prongs. The scholar must demonstrate a disability with one of those 13 categories that we talked about earlier. Doctor's note and diagnosis do not necessarily dictate the IEP. If you have a note that says my child has ADHD, that doesn't mean you now have an IEP. It means we'll do our assessments, determine the needs, and discuss that. The scholar must show they require special education and special education related services. Scholar could have a disability, but I think it meant to say not necessarily qualify for an IEP, but maybe they will. Same for 504, Donna is saying, same thing. Needs to be discussed.
So if a parent does a request, then within 15 days, we're required to respond to the parent with either an assessment plan or a prior written notice stating why we're denying the assessment. 95% of the time, we're going to say yes and provide the assessment. But within those 15 days, we want to talk to the parent, and some of you guys have started doing this to find out why. Why are you requesting special education services? What disability are you suspecting? So we can find out, because sometimes parents say, I want a special ed assessment, and really all they want is, I need a reading intervention.
Dawn says SST data. That helps to determine if they need to be tested. It's important to go through that SST process.
As much as possible. Sometimes we can ask, even if they put it in writing, we can ask a parent, are you willing to do the SST process so we can collect some data and get your child into an early intervention right away.
With fidelity.
Fidelity, yes. So I love that, Casey. So just remember those things as we move forward. So here's some major timelines. I'm going to hit this. We all know those. We have 15 days to provide an assessment plan. Oh, one thing I forgot about child find. That's what this sentence left off, because we were talking about the other day. I do apologize. We've been a little busy, as we all have. Child find doesn't end when a scholar is eligible. So there's a continued child find requirement once a child's eligible. For example, the student could be eligible for special education services, SAI. Somebody notices, you know what? They're stuttering. Then we would be required, because we're suspecting another disability, to assess to see if they require speech services. Same thing under 504. Not as much because it's a little more open-ended, but under special ed, we have a continued, even once a kid is eligible, to continue with child find when we consider that there may be additional disabilities or services required. So 15 days from a referral, could be from a parent, from us, whatever. We have 60 days to complete the assessment. And complete means we actually hold the IEP within 60. Any records requests, we have 5 days to get those records to them. Parent says, I want my kids' records. Immediately get a hold of our office. If parent requests an IEP, we have 30 calendar days to hold that IEP. There is no such thing as an emergency IEP. How many of you have gotten those requests? Yeah, there is no such thing. Does not exist. Now, being respectful to the family and the parent, we're going to hold that meeting as soon as we can and then when we have enough information. Interim placements 30 days from enrollment. This is mandatory. I know the end of September is a pain because we're going to have about how many 20 kids who we think are joining us, 20 to 30 right now. We won't know until we see the ink on the MA, but that's a lot of meetings at the end of September. Then we have to hold the IEP annually, once every 12 months. Reassess every 3 years. We try to combine those two meetings, the year that the annual and assessment are due. What that means for us is we can move one earlier. We can't move one later. We can never be late. And the assessment timeline starts when we receive the signed assessment plan for the 60 days. So some of our parents get confused, but I asked for it. Why isn't it done? You didn't sign the paperwork. We cannot assess unless we have parent consent. And so best practice, we try to date stamp those in our lists. Any questions on timelines? Any timelines you're confused on or any timeline myths you'd like me to undo? So the different types of IEPs, we have initial, interims, plan review, parent requests, review of progress or ISE. These are when we actually have an obligation. If a scholar is failing in general education or not making progress towards their goals and objectives, Compass must hold an IEP meeting to discuss why and try to intervene. That's why it's so important that we're sharing grades and we're consulting with each other at all times. Eligibility review, that's every 3 years, and manifestation determinations for discipline. All right, big announcement. No more manifest for ISE. That procedure will be changing. There'll still be an IEP, but we're not going to try to answer 2 questions that don't necessarily match because it has to do with discipline. The team will still go through the process, but we aren't calling it a manifest. That came from legal. So pretty much the same process. We're just not calling it a manifestation. So we talked a little bit about this, preparing for the IEP meeting. I like to do this activity when I'm in person with people, where we talk about the best and the worst IEP meetings. What's our time? I'm doing okay. I'd like to put you guys into groups. So we look at preparation for IEP meetings. It's important. We know our issues, pre-meet with the Compass team, gather our information. So that's the process. So we can put in the content. So we can schedule the meeting correctly. Make sure we've got all the required members and get that everything out to the parent. I'm going to put you all in breakout rooms. And I'm going to put you in breakout rooms of 5. And in that room, I want you to talk to each other about the best and the worst parent meeting you've ever been in. So we're gonna do 5, I said, right?
Amy, just to clarify, any parent meeting or specific to an IEP?
Any parent meeting, because they're all the same. Any parent meeting, because some of you may not have been in a parent meeting in a while, an IEP in a while, but you've had parent meetings. Could be your own parent meeting even. Like for your own kid, the best and worst. Okay, jump in those rooms. Is that working? All right. Best and worst.
I thought I heard 5, but I could be wrong.
Oh, okay, 5 of us in each room. Oh, perfect.
We're all here.
We're all here. I was hoping Jacob would be in my room because him and I had a parent meeting at the end of last year, and I feel like that's the one that immediately popped in my head and has scarred me a little bit.
What happened? I'm like, I want to hear it. Go.
It was just a situation where I think the parent already came in pretty untrusting of schools and just has gone through, had gone through a bunch of different school options, and we were very much trying to like help and support. It was specifically with concurrent enrollment, but obviously we don't have control over the colleges, what classes they offer, getting the scholars into those classes. It's all out of our control. So we try to help, do what we can. But I think because the parent had kind of come in with a little bit of that, not trusting the school system. I think in the past, she really hadn't been supported. A lot of that was coming into the meeting. So we were really trying to help and support, but it was just like, she wasn't hearing us. And then she wanted to take everything into her own hands. And I think found basically the information we were giving her was accurate and true. And then she left Compass. So that's how that ended. But I think they ended up getting a PSA because I think it probably was just best for them. They really wanted to just make a lot of those decisions. And but that trust piece, I mean, just like how we went over at the retreat, I feel like that trust piece is huge. And that's kind of one of my takeaways of not just with staff, but also establishing that trust up front with the parents, especially sensing that maybe they've had mistrust with schools in the past. So that's my automatic thought. I feel like I've been in a lot of good meetings and those ones don't stand out to me as much, but just like parents that are just open to hearing all options are very appreciative of the support that they're getting. And I feel like we have a ton of those meetings here. So there's my 2.
Mo, I'm wondering, because when Amy said, think about your worst parent meeting, I wonder if it's the same person that I'm thinking of.
Oh my gosh, it might be.
This story sounds very familiar. I had a meeting with this parent, I think it was 2 years ago, and her son was enrolled in Avid, and he did not do anything all year despite numerous attempts and efforts and outreach to ensure that he was logging in and attending learning labs, because that's kind of a requirement for high school for Avid in a way, or at least complete an exit ticket if they can't attend live, and nothing was completed. At the end of the year, he got a F in the course, and the mom was saying, well, he's in concurrent enrollment at college. You need to change the grade. You need to disenroll him. Blah blah blah.
I know who you're talking about.
Is it the same one?
Parent. It's not
no, it's
actually,
not. Okay.
but you are bringing up. Yeah, this is another. Yeah.
This parent was very interesting and very, very vocal, and same thing, didn't really trust public education. Now has left Compass, and I don't think he graduated. I know he was in 12th grade, but I don't think he actually graduated with
I think
us.
Gabby knows who it is too. He didn't graduate with us.
Okay. Yeah, it's Gabby's scholar. It was, at least. But yeah,
I know who this is. Oh yeah. I was in those meetings.
Everybody has been involved.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, I had an ST who I think like she got an opportunity to teach at her own kid's school, but I think like half of her reason for even looking was because this parent just tanked her.
Yeah.
She was
And
so
they did
hard.
have a lot of different
So hard.
STs this
Yeah.
one. They made their way through. So yeah, everybody has probably been involved.
Well, because
Yeah.
they got withdrawn, and then they
Mhm.
re-enrolled after their withdrawal.
Yes.
Oh,
Yes. Yep. We are all talking about the same person.
Yep.
That's funny.
Yep,
It looks
it
like we
is.
have 60 seconds left, so somebody else jump in.
I can share. I've been in a lot of awkward IEPs and things like that, but I think it's just lack of knowing what you're walking into that has led me into some of these difficult ones. Like my craziest one, I had to call Amy midway with, I didn't know what I was walking into, and mom had called an addendum, and she had her ophthalmologist with her, and they were requiring like these vision therapy glasses and like a vision therapy retreat for the whole family, and the doctor was backing it up, and I was just like, I have no clue, like if I should approve this or what I should do. And it was something that was completely out of my wheelhouse. Mom was super upset. And then she went to the course like, well, why are we even having this IEP if we don't have the right people that do know what they're doing? And I felt terrible in it. But it's just one of those situations where I was like, it just wasn't properly staffed. And if I would have known ahead of time what I was walking into, I could have better prepared for it. But I just thought it was like, just your regular IEP, going into it, an amendment, here, mom out, not realizing like she was coming in with a plan and coming in with people that were backing her up for her plan. So yeah, it made for a really awkward IEP. Amy was great. She jumped right in and she helped out. And then she's been helping mom ever since. But now every time there's like an amendment or anything comes up weird, I always reach out to the ST like, hey, do you have an idea what this IEP is about? What's mom looking for? Just so I can kind of get a feel of, am I going to be able to handle this on my own, or am I going to need backup and support? So I definitely learned from that. Start questioning a little bit more, like, what is this IEP for? What services does this child have, and what do they need? So it was a learning experience for sure.
Totally. I think that is hard when you're going in and just, those questions come up and you're just kind of like, catches you so off guard, and you're like,
Yeah.
I don't even know.
I don't know. Yeah.
Mhm.
I felt terrible. And I was like, I wish I did know. It was just something that was like, even now, I'm like, it's out of my control. I would need like an Amy approval,
All right, somebody give me an example of the worst parent meeting you've ever been in. Who wants to share out? I love these stories. I'll call on somebody.
I shared with my breakout group the one that went legal, and I had to get to legal prep and all that stress.
So, who wants to share out the best one they were ever in? Or the best one you heard about from somebody? Come on, I know you've been in some good meetings where you left just feeling warm and fuzzy and your heart full.
Anytime they don't go south, I feel warm and fuzzy with my heart full. It's one or the other, right? They go well and everyone's happy, then I feel warm and fuzzy. But when they start to go south, and there's a few of those I come to my mind too.
Does anybody have a specific one they want to share?
I'll just share, I feel like it happens quite often, which is good, of when we're on graduating senior like IEPs and the parents are just super appreciative. It's kind of like that final like leaving Compass, and they're just super appreciative, and sometimes there's tears, and it really does. Those ones are like the best, of just hearing that appreciation from the parents of how we've supported the scholars, and it really does reflect on the whole team of they're just have felt so supported and maybe hadn't received that support in the past. So And I feel like we have a lot of those, way more than the bad situations. So those ones are always just leave me feeling very good.
Great. Does anybody want to share out a specific one that went bad?
I vote for Erin to share hers. That was really funny.
It was an IEP meeting, and Janae remembers, and I know Deborah remembers because she was on. And it's not an IEP, but it was actually probably one of the funniest situations we ever had with a parent meeting. And it turned out that it actually wasn't the parent. This was probably like 7 years ago when I was working in online, and we'd had a parent meeting, and the scholar had created his own form of like artificial intelligence, essentially. Deborah's laughing, she knows what I'm saying. And so the scholar had put up a picture in front of their camera, and it was the dad, and somehow he was able to animate the mouth of the dad. So when the scholar was talking, it was the dad's mouth that was moving. And so it was when Joel Warren was here. It was just Deborah and I and Joel. And Joel was like sitting there staring, like didn't know what to do. And Deborah's laugh right now is we just started laughing. Like we couldn't even help it. We're like, where's your dad? Anyways, it was hysterical. Just thought it was funny. So.
Oh, somebody had a pots and pans meeting with all the noise in the background.
Okay, I totally
yes.
forgot. Can I share it really quick?
Please.
This is hilarious because and it slowed down a bit, but to this day, Casey and I and Melissa, I would just text her randomly pots and pans, and you just start laughing. We were in a meeting, and I don't even remember the details, Case, but we were in a meeting, and we're trying to talk to this parent, and I kid you not, you guys, somebody is in the background, I swear, banging on pots and pans. And I'm like, oh my, we're trying to hold this meeting. Mel actually was on. I had to turn my camera off. You guys know when you have to turn your camera off because it's so funny that you can't control yourself. And so Mel is doing this really good professional job, and she's like talking to the parent. Meanwhile, pots and pans. I'm like messaging Casey, is that pots and pans banging? And Mel just goes through the whole meeting so professionally while I have my camera off because I can't keep it together. So to this day, I'll text like pots and pans, and we just start laughing. Totally forgot about that one, Casey. That was a good one.
Well, no, it was funny at the end. She's like, okay, what's going on in the background? Is that pots and pans? So she had to put her game face back on.
But the mom was like,
meeting.
oh no. She's like, I don't know what you're talking about.
It's like, what
and we're like, how do you not hear that? It was pretty funny.
The good old days.
So what are some components of a really good meeting? What kind of happens, or what things does the team do so it ends up being a good meeting? I heard from Matea positive feelings and successes are talked about a lot. What else?
I think for me,
go ahead.
Sorry, Jen. I think for me, it's just getting that background knowledge and know what I'm walking into that meeting ahead of time. And so I've learned that the hard way with one of my meetings that you've had to jump into, Amy, not knowing what an amendment was for an IEP and just going in thinking like, oh, it'll be a simple amendment, and then getting there and there's a doctor there and they're asking for a nurse full-time in person. And I'm like, whoa, I should have reached out to the ST and kind of gotten background of why is mom calling this amendment? So I could have been better prepared and made sure we had the proper staff for that meeting before jumping in, not knowing. So I've learned that the hard way a couple of times. So that'd be my biggest thing. What is the meeting for? Am I prepared for it? Do we have everyone that needs to be there?
Preparation is key, data and having information. Anything else that makes a meeting go really well? Minds are open. I see. That's a good one.
I was going to add that having it be a discussion, and so including everyone and having that guided structure. I know a lot of the case managers will use kind of the same PowerPoint, and I think it keeps it moving. It keeps us on track. Everyone knows what's going to be coming next because they have the agenda, and just really valuing all of the voices on the team.
That organization and those 5 cores. If anybody ran my training at the retreat, Michelle, you just summarized it. Fabulous. That a very important part of including everybody. I like some of these comments in the chat are wonderful. No assumptions, open-minded. Demonstrating trust is great. Thank you, Jacob. And always putting the child's needs first. That's what makes a meeting great. Jen.
I told my team this, for as long as I can remember being a teacher and a coordinator, I try to find a connection with the family, the parent, the kiddo. I have kids of my own, so that's kind of where I go first always. And I'm not sharing like all tons of personal information, but you can see a twist in the meeting, a shift, if you will, when you let the parent know, like, I get it. I literally have a child your age who is doing the same things. And they all of a sudden, and you don't have to be a parent, you guys, you could be an aunt, you could be whatever, but all of a sudden they're like, oh, like you do get it. And there's this kind of cool relational connection, if you will, that happens because it's more than just I'm the coordinator in here as the admin and here's the case manager talking at you. Like I connect with them and it's so cool to just see how they sometimes in tears because they're so thankful and they just feel lost and you just give them a little tidbit of parenting advice or auntie advice or whatever. They're just, that I think is huge. And I think that piggybacks on what Jacob put in the chat is just that trust and that connection. Instead of just, I'm Mrs. Tatum, I'm the coordinator who takes notes in this meeting. Like I really like to jump in, and anybody that's been in an IEP with me knows I try to connect and relate. So,
and that's really important. There's actually I did a little training when I work on facilitation skills for any meeting, making sure everybody feels affiliated. We're respecting like 5 cores, other places have 7, you know, but you're really addressing the needs of everyone in those meetings is so important. You guys are awesome. You just came up with that on your own. I love it. Okay, so there's a big difference between a good and a bad meeting. And when it comes down to all the things you guys were talking about. So I'm sharing on the screen and I put it in the chat. IEP consult meeting. So this is kind of an agenda we've come up with to help guide those meetings. So prior to the meeting, you're setting up your roles, talking about who's going to be there. And we share this with each other when we do a pre-meeting. So hang on to this form. It's something you can like shoot over to the case manager, Lauren or Leslie, and Roya when she comes on board and say, hey, I think we need a pre-meet to talk about this student. This is who you can fill in who you know. We'll fill in the rest. And in the meeting, we'll go through these questions. So we're talking about roles because we know being organized is important in a meeting. So we don't have the pans banging in the background or people scrambling to find information. Talking about what do we know the concerns are, parent concerns. Sometimes we as an organization have concerns, right? They're not showing up. They're not turning on the camera. I'm concerned if the scholar's doing okay. And then procedural questions, then you can fill in follow-ups and who needs to do what before we get in the meeting so we're all together and on the same kind of page. If you notice, I do not have in here anywhere where we put in writing in our agenda the offer of faith. That can be a verbal discussion. Oh, I hate this. Hang on. No, go away. There we go. I'm back. You guys are so much better at this than I am. Okay. So there's a little playing field. And we have to plan ahead on who does what.
Yeah,
all right. So we're going to take a 2-minute stretch break. Does everybody want one? And then we'll come back. I'm sure everybody needs, after that first cup of coffee, a little break. So 2-minute stretch break. I'm going to set the timer. We'll be back.
Okay, IEP team membership. So who is required? The parent, the general education teacher, ST, the SPED teacher, case manager, any service providers, the speech provider, OT, whoever is providing a service that will be discussed at that meeting needs to be there to discuss. So that would be the related service provider. An LEA, it's got to have an LEA admin there. And any individual who can interpret the instructional implications of evaluation results. So if you have a report, you need somebody there who knows how to interpret that report, be able to discuss those results. Okay. Next. Are you able to click the next one?
Yeah, sorry about that.
Sorry.
No, something's weird on my end.
The IEP team member roles in the meeting. So you have a facilitator. This could be the case manager, or maybe if it's a tricky IEP, it might be me, Leslie, Amy, somebody else that's kind of taking over to facilitate and help make sure everything is going smoothly. There's a note taker that would typically be the LEA admin. The recorder. So say in the event the case manager or the Amy is running a meeting, right? Well, the case manager could be the recorder and will be writing on the IEP in real time to make sure changes get reflected. Prior to the meeting, these roles should be established. Okay, excusal of an IEP team member. So IDEA established that that an IEP team member can be excused with prior parent permission, prior. So the excused member should send in their information. I really advise against having a speech report and making our own determination without the speech therapist. That would not be a time where you would want to do that. A general education teacher, you really got to be there. It would be very rare a circumstance. You would need that. Even if you're not discussing general education, you're not discussing grades and attendance, you could be discussing speech. You could have up to 2 years later, the parent come back and say, my offer of faith was all wrong. And the gen ed teacher knew there was a problem. And if they had been there to discuss that, then this would have all turned out differently for my scholar. It's very ill-advised to have, even with permission, get that whole core team there. Okay. Request to record. I think all of us have had that request. I want this recorded. The parent should let us know 24 hours in advance that they're going to do this, but sometimes you get that surprise. If you get that surprise, you have the right, if you don't feel prepared, or you got to kind of ask the team, or we're going to be recorded, we're all good with that. If people are not good with that, you can reconvene, or the team can decide, yeah, let's just go ahead. Let's get this over with. We spent months trying to get everybody together. Let's do this. If the parent is recording, please make sure somebody on Compass team is recording. So important. They could piece together. Things could go right. Make sure you have your own recording. Just make sure you have it. So, all right.
And quick reminder, make sure you're not video recording, because EdCode is not caught up with Zoom yet, and video recording is not allowed, only audio recording. So I know that's difficult. You got to set it up the right way so it works.
All right. Roles and responsibilities. The admin, LEA admin, this is typically a program coordinator or director. They'll take the notes for the IEP, include any important conversation. Even if a SPED admin is there, the LEA admin is still required there and would be taking the notes.
So I added this piece. So one of our roles here at Compass is that the LEA, okay, does the notes. So one of the things we always want to remind people is that we never put brand names or names of devices or programs in our IEP. But I've also put in here, and I'll put it in the chat, is a little video about note taking that our SELPA has put together. And it's a link. So, you know, if you want to review, I'm sure many of you have already seen it.
Okay. That link is in the chat now. Okay, ensuring no IEP team member makes definitive statements such as we always do this, we never do this, or we can't do this. Ensure the IEP team is based on the student's individual needs. If disagreements occur about the type of service that should be used to address the disability, ensure all IEP team members are given opportunities to share. And Amy discussed this earlier. Hear everything, hear all the information. Encourage the team to focus on the interest, how to meet the need, versus we're taking a stance. Just listen, consider everything, and determine what is the actual need for the scholar.
So always avoid positions. We often, as human beings, have an opinion and we take a position. Or we believe the organization has a position. So, for example, because Carly brought up a great one, the vision therapy. Never take the position that Compass never does vision therapy. Understand that that is a unique related service that very few scholars require, especially in this virtual setting. That's different than the position we don't do. So if you take, when parents, however, sometimes take a position, or their advocates always take a position because that's their job. That's their job, to be positional. We don't want to take a position. We want to always think about interests. What is it really that people are asking for? And that's where that leadership comes in when we get stuck. You can help the team move from being positional to listening by doing some questioning with the team members. So if the ed specialist isn't able to do it, because sometimes they get scared too, remember? They're teachers. That's where your role as the leader, administrator, general ed would step in to try to get the team to keep moving.
Sorry. Tips for facilitating communication. Silence. It's okay to pause when you're hearing and trying to process. Don't feel pressure to just, belt out an answer. Just, you can take time, think about it, acknowledge, I see, I hear you. Door openers, a really good strategy when you're just not sure. When someone says, I need, the dolphin or whatever. Tell me more. Tell me more about your needs. Tell me why. Tell me, I want to hear your thoughts about this. Why do you think, this is needed? What's going on? And that can open the door to further discussion about how the team can support the scholar. Reflecting, again, I heard you say this. I want to make sure I'm understanding correctly. Things like that. Make sure you clarify. And again, non-committal. So we're not promising anything. We're just saying, I understand, I hear you. Tell me more.
Repeating back what you've heard somebody else say, especially when you see that they're upset or feeling, or they're acting a little aggressive, is a really good strategy. It can de-escalate, as well as what it does is help somebody know that you're hearing them. Now, if their camera's on, you know it. When someone feels like they're connected and they hear you, they'll nod. We do that all the time. If somebody says something that connects with us, and we're like, oh, you got me. It's this natural reaction. It's kind of a nod. Then you know you're back on track. So these are some things you can do. There's some other things you can do as well, where, you know, as you become a better facilitator with other skills, and throughout the year, I may do some other trainings on some of these tricks and tips on how to work with others, because these aren't just good skills for an IEP meeting, staff meeting, family meeting, right? It's skills you can use if you're on the board or in on a committee for your church, your art group, your book club. They're just good skills for facilitation. Some people come by them naturally. Others of us have to learn a little bit and practice, because it's not natural to say, oh, I heard you say, right? Need to practice it. So this is the magic word whenever there is a issue. Consider. Write the word down. Remember this word. Our job is to consider. The law says we have to consider a parent request. So you want to use that word. You want to make sure it's in the notes. We considered. Compass considered the parent request. But what does it mean to consider? It means to listen, gather data, discuss the other options. It's okay to say, I need more information so we can consider. But never say, I can't make that decision. We have to ask the director, or I've got to ask my superintendent. Always, when you're in that situation, say, we need more information. Do these words help anybody? Have any of you used these words before? Consider in IEP meetings? No. Okay. What time is it? We're running out of time. Lauren, you want to take this one?
Okay, ST rules and responsibilities. The supervising teacher should make sure that they have prepared, should have a basic understanding of their scholar. Be ready to share maybe star scores, their attendance data, any present levels. I know our environment's a little unique, but to the greatest extent possible, know your scholar, know what grade level they can read at, be able to just basically discuss those present levels so we know how to support the scholar, know as much as possible, know what's working, know what the family has said, I've tried this and this and I can't, know the options that have already been taken and the interventions that have already gone on, so we know what our starting point is and how to help. All right, services. So Compass, you've heard this before, is an independent study program. The parents, learning coach, and the learning coaches are the instructors. Compass needs to provide that free, appropriate public education. Not all scholars can receive FAPE in an independent study virtual setting. They all can't. If the IEP team determines they can't, Compass is responsible to fund a place in another setting. That could be back to the brick and mortar, that could be non-public school, or in-person services. Compass needs to look at what supports are required. I don't know how much you want to discuss this, but virtual, our services are offered virtually. I know that it's better for a lot of kids to have that in person, but can they access virtually? And that's what needs to be discussed. Can we access virtually or can we not? We need to give them what they need, but if they can access. Anyway, okay, so
You're right, Lauren. It's as we
I don't
look
wanna-
at each scholar individually, there are some times where we can tell from assessment and data, the scholar is not receiving educational benefit. They're not progressing towards their goals and objectives with virtual speech or maybe virtual OT. Maybe their needs are such that they need that hands-on, hand over hand. Then the IEP team, based on data and information, might make that recommendation. Again, those are things we want to talk about ahead of time. We want to make sure we can find people, etc. It goes back to both Rowley and Enru when we look at FAPE and Ed benefit. For most scholars with a disability, in person, one-on-one, for any of us teaching, probably the best. But the parents chose to be in a virtual, non-classroom based setting, so we provide those services in this setting. But because it's an IEP and it's individualized, if a specific service needs to be provided in person and it's possible to do that, then Compass would make that offer. Now, where it gets kind of a bigger discussion is when every single service the child needs is in person, then that begs the question, is independent study appropriate? Because they're no longer doing independent study with their special ed. And for some of those scholars, that's really all the education they're doing. So that's where some of those tough questions come into place. And again, it goes back to ed code and law. A scholar in special education, the IEP team has to determine that independent study is appropriate for the child to receive FAPE. Those are tough questions, and they take a lot of work for us to gather data on at different times. But the main thing here is we look at services, they're our responsibility. We cannot tell a parent, you know, this isn't working for you, you need to go somewhere else. That's different than the ISE process where the scholar and the parent are violating the master agreement. Totally different. This is they're following the master agreement, but the scholar is not making progress. We have done everything we can with our services, and we may have to look at something else. Questions on that, because I know that's a sticky point often. Any questions in the chat? No. All right,
This
it's
slide kind of talks about that a little more as well. My scholars' parents want in-person services. They know someone who has that. We know you have it. Why won't you give it to us? This is individualized. This other scholar that got in-person services, they have their IP, they have their unique needs. Not everyone's needs are the same. So just because one scholar does require it doesn't mean the other. We look at each scholar individually and see, do you need that extensive data, trials, discussing what happens, how can we troubleshoot this, how can we help you access virtually, and make that determination on an individual needs basis. So that's kind of what we just talked about. So we do need to check.
I know these are tough when we have a parent that asks for in-person services and we already have a signed IEP for virtual. Or when they first enter Compass and they don't quite understand. We always want to encourage the parent to participate in all their services. I see a question somewhere.
Dawn says, what about the parents that don't like too much computer time for their kids? What do you tell them?
I don't like that much computer time. Well, I think my response to the parent on that is tell me more about what your concerns are with your child receiving synchronous services in the IEP that they require. What's your concern? I always come back with questions. And then if it comes back, well, it's just my personal opinion that they shouldn't be online. Oh, well, let's talk about what Compass is and what it means to be in a virtual independent study setting. That's all you can do. And then in the end, it's like, here's our offer of faith. This is how we do it.
There you go. There you go.
Hang on, next slide.
I don't think we have time. Do we have time for the breakout room? It's at 10:51.
Nope. How about just an open answer? Let's try this. When do you believe in-person services are required in a virtual setting? You can put your answer in the chat. Okay, once less restricted interventions are exhausted. Perfect, Michelle. When the data shows a scholar is not successful online. Very good. When there's data show that virtual services are not working. Excellent, Jason. When they're not progressing towards their goals and objectives virtually. Awesome. Oh, this is repeat. We'll skip that one. So we're about at the end. So again, just to summarize some things we've already talked about. Be organized with an IEP meeting. And we're showing the same things with our ed specialists and our case managers. So we want to be organized. We're going to be more organized this year than we've ever been, I think. We have 3 different agencies who'll be providing our special education related services for the most part. In-person services, of course, those are spread out a little bit, but most of our services will be provided by 3 different agencies. Those agencies are providing us with dedicated staff for speech and occupational therapy. So we'll have a group of related service providers who can become part of our team to serve the scholars and work with us and with the families. I'm really excited because we'll be able to communicate with each other, and those providers will be following our Arctic values. We're working very closely with the agencies, so it should be really exciting. Now, downside, will some of our parents this year go, wait a minute, why has my speech therapist changed? Yes, this will be a transition year a little bit. We'll work with those parents, but if you should get some of those questions, remember, we did this so it's better for the scholars. Having dedicated staff will mean better communication, better teaming, better ability for the speech therapist to work with our general ed teachers and our special ed teachers for your child. This is a move in the right direction for your scholar. We'll have less turnover because they're dedicated staff to Compass. Whereas before, we had times where we would change speech therapists. I don't know, we had one kid, poor kid, 3 times in a year because one agency dropped the kid. The next agency, they went on maternity leave. The next one we could find, couldn't fit the schedule with the family. It was a nightmare. I felt so bad. That won't happen when we have these dedicated staff providers for us. But we know we'll have some questions. Communication, we know that, we talked about that. I'll be clicking the button. I thought it was shared Compass wide, but I guess it wasn't. So you'll have access. And somebody asked about the guide site. The SPED guide site needs updated. That's on our list. So we're going to get that updated, this form there and a few others. Be on time. Have questions and concerns prepared ahead of time if you have any. Always hope for the best. Always hope for the best, but be prepared for the worst, right? And always remember, the IEP isn't static. What we say today, we can call another meeting and, discuss some more. It's a living, breathing document, almost like the scholar. But the key is it's what Compass believes will provide the student with ed benefit. It's reasonably calculated. That's actually out of the law. We have to reasonably calculate. We don't have to be exact. They didn't say you're a mathematician, you got to get the answer right the first time. We have to reasonably calculate on data what's best, what we believe is the appropriate offer of faith. So we know that there's times that we have issues. We've got legal restrictions. We have beliefs differences. Sometimes it's lack of resources, right? I don't know, the budget keeps changing. Lack of trust. And that was brought up a couple times in today's discussion. So we need to build that trust. It's really hard virtually, but it can be done. Jen has some great ways. All it takes is 2 minutes to make that connection when you start the meeting. Sounds like you're an expert at that, Jen. I think that's fabulous. Know that parents come in sometimes with fear. Or some of us come in the meeting with a little fear. I meant that advocate yelled at me last time. I'm afraid of him. We have to move up beyond the fear, and then we have to help our parents move beyond their fear by building the trust. And sometimes there's some unmet psychological needs by people. And, those are the ones that try to take over the meeting, control. You're never quite sure where they're coming from. We can't fix that, but we can be aware. So if the parent is feeling guilty, they have baggage from before, and they feel like they really need to push so they're heard, we need to try to be aware of those things and try to meet them where they're at. All right, we are out of time. This is a review, I think, for most of you, where we know assessment drives the needs, drives the goals, drives the service and placement. You never talk about services first. Present levels, here's some best practices and some words you can use or look for when we're identifying needs. Here's some little samples. Present levels say they're having trouble with reading. That's an area of need. If the highest student's handwriting can't be read by the teacher, so they can't communicate and participate, that's a need. Be mindful on how we talk about present levels. We always want to talk positive, not just negative. We don't want to just talk about the weaknesses. And then we were going to go over accommodations and modifications just quickly. This is a great example to look at. Modifications alter, change, make it not the same. Accommodations don't alter or change the goal we're trying to reach. Just to note, just because they have an IEP doesn't mean we're providing modifications. Only about 2% of our population at Compass, about 60 kids, actually should have modifications listed in their IEPs for curriculum and instruction. Most of the other scholars We're accommodating. We're not significantly changing the goals or standards being taught. We're not significantly changing, again, the standards or goal of the lesson for the scholar. So there's a lot of different things we can do. So for an example, audiobooks and a few others. All right, some modifications. And then there's a few other things in here. Documents, which all of this is review. That was a lot of information. I'm glad we were able to take time for questions. You can always read the slides. So thank you for joining us. Please know to always come and communicate. Our goal this year is to increase our ability to collaborate for the best of our scholars. I thank you for your time. I thank you for your thoughts, and I thank you for your questions. And I thank you for being an important part of Compass Charter School.